What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Early Read BetSided's college football betting show. I'm your host, Reed Wallach, talking Week 9 college football, pushing double digits before you know it. We got a great show planned today as I'm joined by my fearless leader. If you've been on the BetSided YouTube page before, the BetSided website, it's Ben Heisler, managing editor of BetSided. Ben, joining to help a fellow Big Ten struggling fan here. I'm a Wisconsin grad. Ben is a Indiana fan. It's pretty dark here, but we're talking some Big Ten football today. Our marquee matchup is Ohio State, Penn State. So hopefully, we'll talk about some of the better teams in the Big Ten. We got a bunch to get to, though. That's our marquee matchup. Ben is going to bring up his underdog round robin that has been heating up. We're going to talk some early leans there. We got a bunch of bets to give out. I got like 9 or 10. We got a lot to get to. Ben, thank you for joining the show, man. I really appreciate it. How's it going?
I'm excited to be here, Reed. Excited to talk about the season that is Big Ten football. It's fascinating. Like, all these different contracts are up for the Big Ten going to the next few years. All these major television networks are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to watch, 10-7 defensive battles, lots of running. Like, the SEC is still available. Like, unless ESPN just has the full market share on them, I don't know why everyone is rushing to grab the Big Ten purely other than market share. It's one of those situations where you're watching Big Ten football, you're kind of in like this weird cult of we're going to stick with it. We're going to hang with them, but we might as well, because that's kind of where we're stuck here.
Yeah, see, I think it's going to be even funnier in a few years when USC joins, and you're going to see USC travel to Bloomington in like the second weekend in November, and you're going to see Lincoln Riley with this face, just like, what am I doing here? Like, we had to leave the Pac-12. We had to leave sunny California to go to the middle of nowhere, middle America, to go play Indiana. Yeah, I mean, listen, me and you have a special place in our heart for Big Ten football.
I was going to say really quickly too, Reed, I always joke that the one time that I would ever go and make an annual visit to the Rose Bowl was if Indiana ever got good enough at football to make the Rose Bowl game. Well, now I don't have to wait anymore. I can just wait until they play UCLA and just go ahead and just completely cheat the system.
Yeah, no, listen, now you have an excuse, but we're going to talk, though, about a team that is probably far, far, far from Indiana and Wisconsin in terms of how they play, and that's Ohio State, arguably the best team in the country. We're going to catch people up to speed with some Ohio State before their big matchup against Penn State. Little preview action there, and then our marquee matchup. Just a little bit of housekeeping here. 4-3 week for the early read picks from yours truly. We're now 35-27-1 against the spread on the year with our picks. So well ahead of schedule here last week. I mean, Oklahoma State winning outright, didn't get the line. They ended up winning, a thriller there. But while you're here, make sure you subscribe to the BetSided YouTube page. Almost at 1,000 subscribers, so would really appreciate that. If you're listening on podcast form after the live show, like it, give it 5 stars, whatever it is. Leave a review. Really appreciate that. Let's talk some Buckeyes, though. Let's get into it here. Going into the year, Ben, I said I'm not sold on Alabama just yet. I think that there's still a lot of questions to answer, and I am still pretty bullish on Georgia, the reigning national champions, and Ohio State. I thought Ohio State had a chance to be the best team in the country if the defense took a step forward under first-year defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. And, they have. They are arguably the best offense in the country and the best defense in the country. They are 5th in yards per play allowed on the defense side of the ball and 1st in yards per play on offense. We'll start with the offensive side of the ball. I mean, C.J. Stroud, Heisman favorite. We know what he's going to do. Maybe the number 1 pick in the draft next year. Over 2,000 yards already, 28 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Oh, and did I tell you that, the dark horse, everyone's favorite preseason pick for the Heisman, Jackson Smith and Jigba receiver, he's hardly played with a hamstring issue. So, this offense has been at half capacity almost for most of the season, and they're still carving up everybody. But it's really the defense to me that makes this team a national championship contender. Top 5 in success rate, 3rd in EPA per play on the defensive side of the ball. Jim Knowles really has this defense humming, and now, they look like, to me, the most flawless team in the country. Listen, they haven't been tested just yet, but this is a team that is well-rounded on both sides of the ball and can handle a physical Georgia team on defense and going to try and lock you down. But they could hit you with explosive plays in the offensive game. Really becomes really difficult to see. Friend of the program, Parker Fleming, at StatsOwar on Twitter, he does his weekly success rate and EPA charts. Bottom left, you're really bad. You're the worst team in the country. Top right, you're the best team in the country. There may be like 10 teams in like that top right category, but all the way on the tippy top of the right for the best offense and the best defense, it's Ohio State. So, I know they're going up against maybe some limited offenses, and we're going to see how it goes this weekend. But to me, this Ohio State team is the best team in the country, and I think we're going to see that play out in the college football playoff. And I think right now they are the rightful favorites. I know they're both plus 180 with Georgia, and Bama at plus 350. But to me, Ohio State is the best team in the country, mainly because of the steps forward on the defensive side of the ball. Ben, I know I just gave a long-winded, really just crowning this Ohio State team. Any pushback, any thoughts you wanted to talk about before we get into this game preview against Penn State?
Not particularly. I know that there's some folks that might say, well, Michigan is going to give them another test this year. Certainly Georgia could be in the conversation amongst those teams with Ohio State. But looking over, I like using a lot of the numbers from team rankings and BetIQ, and they have a lot of good predictive models that I like to reference throughout the course of times where I'm betting on college football, or just try to get a better sense of where a lot of these teams are. So last 5 games, number 1 in their power rankings, number 1 in away games, number 1 in home games, conference games, they rate up near the top. They've also been the best second half team in college football this year. Luck rating, they've actually been far above average, coming in 58th in college football this year. So they haven't relied on opportunistic plays that have only worked out in their favor. And they're consistent. Like, they're blowing out teams in the second half. There hasn't been any game, with the exception of maybe early on against Notre Dame in the first week of the season, that's made you wonder whether or not this is a top tier team. CJ Stroud is taking that next step. Like, there wasn't that game that they had last year against Oregon where all of a sudden you're trying to figure out, okay, which Ohio State team are we going to see? And like you mentioned too, Reed, the defense has taken substantial strides in the right direction. They will take blitzes on you. They'll be able to send only 3 or 4 guys in on the rush. There's just so many difficult ways to try to figure out how to beat this team that even on a road game coming up at Penn State in a very difficult environment, they're not fazed by any of it. They just go about their business and they keep blowing out teams. And it really doesn't get much more difficult. Obviously, the Penn State game this week, but then it's at Northwestern, home against Indiana, at Maryland, and then you have the Michigan game. And I just don't see any possible traps that slow them down the rest of the way. Maybe if they face an SEC team like Georgia, it becomes a different story. Maybe the speed is a little bit more difficult to handle, but I don't know if there's anybody that's knocking them off their perch right now, because I think they have the edge at quarterback and an edge at a lot of the different skill positions as well.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Like, our marquee matchups are typically centered around, the competitive matchups, and teams like Ohio State and Georgia, they just blow out so many teams and they're so far superior that we don't really talk about them as much anymore. I haven't really brought up Ohio State that much on this show just because they're so much better than their competition. Maybe they haven't been challenged all that much, and we will see a tough road test. This will be their toughest game to date for sure on the road. I still think Ohio State is head and shoulders above this Penn State team. And before we give out our best bets for this Ohio State-Penn State game, set the stage for this one. Ohio State, a 15.5-point favorite, total of 61. I went on record. I do not believe in this Penn State team. I bet against them against Michigan. They got boat raced. I don't think that this team is very good. And, in my preseason talk, I thought that this was a transition year for the Nittany Lions. I know they have a nice record and they're ranked, inside the top 15, but Sean Clifford, 6-year quarterback, just stale. I think that the defensive line has shown it can be run on. We saw that against Michigan. They just, spam run plays with Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum. I think Ohio State could find similar success here. I think Penn State is a good team, but they are a far cry from an elite team. And I think that Ohio State is going to pass this test with flying colors. Again, are they going to win? Sure, because they're, laying 2 touchdowns or more. So, I'm not saying much. So in terms of finding value on this game against, in my opinion, fraudulent Penn State team, Ben, I'll go to you first for your best bet. Are you going to lay it with the Buckeyes? You're looking at the total, an upset pick maybe. What do you got?
Yeah, I thought about it from the perspective of whether or not Penn State can neutralize Ohio State's offense, at least in the early portion of the game, because Penn State at home has been a much better defensive team, at least under James Franklin. We'll get to that in just a second. But I just don't like the number right now on either side, a little bit more than 2 touchdowns. If I had a choice, if I had to take a side either way, I'd probably lean towards Penn State maybe in the first half. As I mentioned, Ohio State's been the best second half team in college football this year. But I'm going with the under at 61. This is just kind of what James Franklin does in Penn State games at home in the Big Ten. Since arriving at Penn State, home conference unders for the Nittany Lions are 41, 33, and 1. That's hitting at just under 56% of the time. And that's been the case in this matchup too, Reed. The under's gone 3-0-1 in their last 4 head-to-head matchups, 6-2 to the under in the last 8 games at Beaver Stadium. I know that Ohio State has the sensational playmakers all across the field. We know that CJ Stroud can sling it, but you mentioned the defense. The defense is outstanding as well, allowing just 4 opponent yards per play, 0.25 points per play, and 24.5% allowed on third down. Like, for a Penn State offense that neither of us really believe in, for a sixth-year quarterback that was basically their only option this year that they felt that they had to rely on, it's just not enough for me to feel like this is going to be a game that has a lot of points, particularly from the Penn State side. And both of these defenses have been really quality throughout the course of the year. So give me the under at 61 today.
Yeah, full agreement here. My best bet on this game is also the under 61. 61, a fairly key number in betting college football total. So I would say try and secure that 61. But I agree with you. I think that James Franklin knows what this offense can do, or should I say can't do. I don't think he's going to try and go shot for shot with this Ryan Day, CJ Stroud offense. I think he's going to try and slow this game down. And I don't think he's going to get much, but I think he's going to take the air out of the ball and limit Sean Clifford's ability to make mistakes. I think that, Spencer Petras last week, several pick six. Ohio State put up 50 points. They didn't even need to get 400 yards of total offense. So I think Penn State knows that they need to try and establish the run, try and slow this game down and give themselves a shot late. I think that, like you said, they're going to run out of real estate and they're going to let go of the rope by the end of it. But, I think we're looking at an under game. Ohio State's offense is obviously amazing, number one in yards per play, but they don't play very fast. Right around 100th in fastest tempo in the entire country. Penn State is a fantastic secondary. They are top 20 in EPA per pass. They have future pros in the secondary like Joey Porter Jr. I think that Penn State's going to limit the explosive plays. And also another one, we saw this in the Michigan game. Penn State, really good inside the red zone at limiting touchdowns, making those touchdowns into field goals. Yep. Again, it's Ohio State, so it's definitely a step up in competition, but one or two drives, field goals inside the 40, that this total ends up going sideways really quickly. Penn State top 5 against red zone touchdown rate. So really, really strong, defense in tight. I think this game goes really slow. I think, like you said, Penn State could keep it close early, and then Ohio State pulls away late. I think that, this looks like something, similar to that Michigan score, 41-17, honestly, because Penn State's offense did nothing against Michigan, and this Ohio State team is much better. Penn State had a 60-yard run from Clifford that set up a touchdown and a pick six. That was it. That was it for the offense. So I don't think Penn State is going to end up holding on. I'm not looking to back over 2 touchdowns, though. I like the under. There is our Penn State, Ohio State preview right there. Let's bring up that recap graphic. Yep, me and Ben seeing eye to eye to start the show off. We'll see if that keeps up. We're both on the under 61 as our best bet. Again, that 61 is kind of a key number, so make sure you get that in. So we go from, talking about high-level national championship aspirations teams, and now we're going to go to the Trust Me section of this show, where I listen, I take some gross bets. Ben, you're on a gross bet too. We're taking 2 of maybe the worst teams in the FBS relative to expectations here. So, Ben, give me your handicap here on Temple Navy.
Yeah, and the good news is that you're going to be able to watch one of these nasty matchups. I think this is a 3:30 Eastern game on CBS Sports Network this week. I will take the Temple Owls at plus 13.5.
I agree with you. I'm pissed I missed 14 yesterday. I was staring at it and I missed it. It moved to 13.5. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I still think 13.5 is a reasonable number. I think if you kind of project this game out, you're looking at Navy maybe winning by about a touchdown or so. So I think you're getting really good value, getting close to this number is 14. And even at some books, you can get it at plus 13.5, minus 104. If you want to bet it up to that number of 14, get it at maybe minus 120. You certainly have the option to be able to do so. So let's talk about Temple, because they're a team that actually forced a few turnovers last week against a Tulsa team that I'll talk about in just a little bit. Team that I think is live as a short home dog this week against SMU. One note that I saw from Circa over in Las Vegas, there was a massive move in this game towards the under, like to the point where they actually had to put limits on the bets for this game. And a lot of times, not always, we just talked about the fact that we both like Ohio State, but we're also on the under for Penn State. But a lot of times, often, Reed, you know this, moves to the under tend to favor the underdog here. Temple, 61st in opponent points per play. Navy is 113th. So you're going against a questionable defense for Navy this year. And the question will be, can the Owls just get anything going offensively? They're bottom 3 right now in college football in points per play. But we also know that Navy is an incredibly one-dimensional team. So if you take away what Navy is able to do well, or at least contain them to a certain extent, Temple's defense has been good enough to the point where I think they can keep this game close as opposed to getting blown out from what Navy's able to do with their triple option, with a lot of the running plays that they have. It feels like it's just too many points in favor of a Navy team that might be I don't want to call them fraudulent, but in this particular matchup against a Temple defense that's been opportunistic, I think that trend continues into this week, and I think it's too many points. So yeah, give me Temple at plus 13.5 at minus 104. The last time I checked it at the sports books.
Yeah. Navy, friend of the program, the midshipmen. We bet them as underdogs, though. We do not bet them as favorites. I don't have the figure up in front of me, but I know triple option teams that are laying double digits are, one of the worst bets you can make historically. Doesn't mean that that's going to hit this time, but, historically, if you're playing the numbers out, this isn't a team that's going to run away and hide. They play slow. They can't have explosive plays. The drive sometimes takes 7-8 minutes. So, yeah, I think Temple, a team that has been putting up fights, not every week, but some weeks, they got the cover home last week against Tulsa at home. I think Temple could stay inside this number. This is a bet I am looking at. I got to do a little bit more work, hope it maybe ticks back up to 14, but I don't disagree there. My bet, we backed them last week. We're going back to the well. And this one's really, it was gross last week. This one's like really, really gross now. Cal catching 17.5 against Oregon. If you watched like the big games last week, you watched Oregon just run up and down the field on UCLA. They put up 45 points. They put up 40 points every game since they lost to Georgia in week 1. Well, I'm going to go against them here with Cal. Just to bring up the numbers from last week. Cal 23-9-1 against the spread as an underdog under coach Justin Wilcox. This is the exact spot where he thrives. Covered last week against Washington, 7.5 point dogs. They lost by 7. Had a chance to tie it late. When you extrapolate that number even further, 17-3 as a touchdown or more underdog. So when you're catching 7 or more with Justin Wilcox, he has hit 17 out of 20 times now after last week. I mean, this guy is a ATM when he's catching big. I know no one wants to step in front of Oregon, but this Cal team, their defense limits explosive plays, top half of the country in both explosive run and pass rate. And Oregon's defense, I thought Dan Lanning coached like a hell of a game last week. He saw a track meet coming and, he tried an onside kick early in the game to, catch UCLA off guard. They stole a possession, basically. They knew a shootout was coming, but also because I think he knows his defense is very suspect. UCLA still put up 30 points. They still went up and down the field on them, 6.5 yards per play. Oregon bottom 40 in tackling per Pro Football Focus, 88th in red zone touchdown percentage. So again, when teams getting close, they are scoring against Oregon. So I think Cal, can Jack Plummer sling it a few times, put up get in the end zone 4 times? I think so. I think that this Oregon team might be a little fat and happy after getting a top 15 win there last week at home. On the road, this is where you want Justin Wilcox over 17. I know there's some 17.5, some 17s out there. I think Cal could keep this close. I mean, they moved the ball last week against Washington, especially in that second half. I'll expect them to keep it close here, keep it within earshot, we'll say. So yeah, I'll stand in front of the Oregon wagon for a second straight week. So there are, trust me, bets, 2 like really vile bets there. So let's get that recap graphic up there. Ben's taking Temple, catching 13.5 against Navy. And I am taking Cal plus 17.5 against Oregon at home. Go Bears there. Back to some Big Ten stuff, though, because like we mentioned, we are Big Ten guys. You can see the Wisconsin helmet behind me. I don't see anything for Ben Indiana related. I'm sure there's something I can't see. Something behind Ben Indiana related. But yeah, 2 bad teams this year in college football. Let's see. Maybe we could talk about some maybe not some better teams, but Ben, let's talk some Michigan State. We kind of hinted about the Wolverines and their college football playoff pursuit a little earlier, but you think they're going to run into some trouble this week against Michigan State? Maybe not like upset alert, but this is a big number. So let me hear about it.
Yeah, 22.5 right now. And again, you kind of have to shop around. There's still a handful of sports books that have it at 22.5. Otherwise, the number has moved towards Michigan State at 22. I even saw one that was at 21.5. The Wolverines in this particular matchup, just historically under Jim Harbaugh, have not covered well, and they don't cover these types of point spreads against Michigan State. Going even further back in this rivalry, it's only happened one time where they've won as a 3-touchdown favorite in this matchup. Michigan State has had a rough season to this point, but that game against Wisconsin, I like Michigan State to be live in that game. And they ended up coming back and getting it done in that matchup. rallied, gained some confidence, are coming into this game against Michigan after a bye.
Yep.
Wolverines don't necessarily have a look ahead on their schedule for at least a few weeks. After this, it's Rutgers and Nebraska coming up. But, similar to how Indiana was able to cover against Michigan, I think Michigan State can do something similar. And Indiana, this is not a particularly good team, but they forced some turnovers. It was J.J. McCarthy's first turnover of the season. The Spartans still have moments and opportunistic times where they will force turnovers on defense. They can still generate some pressure. Michigan is a sound, fundamentally, strong team, but it's usually in the second half where if they have a lead, then you can pin your ears back on defense and really start to build it up. But if Michigan State keeps this thing close in the first half, they're going to hang around in this game until eventually the more talented team starts to win out. So I think the Spartans follow a similar format to what Indiana did, which was attack McCarthy in the middle of the field, try to generate some pressure, force a turnover, and then run the ball. Like that, we're able to do that more effectively against Michigan. Penn State not able to do that from before. So I like this opportunity for Michigan State. History says that this is a closer game than most people expect in a rivalry matchup. I think 22.5 is too many points on the road.
Yeah, it's a lot of points. Also, Michigan State's starting to get a little bit healthier off the bye. Maybe a team that could turn around their season off that, like you said, off that win against Wisconsin. It's a big number. I don't know if I'm rushing to bet Michigan at over 3 touchdowns. I'm going to take another underdog here, though. I'm going to take Nebraska catching over a touchdown, 7.5 against Illinois. Illinois has been a great story. I mean, if they didn't let that one drive up to your Hoosiers in week 1, Ben, we're talking about an undefeated Illini team heading into the second half of the season. But now they're in a rare spot as a favorite. I mean, they haven't been expected to win with margin much this season. I mean, you look at Chattanooga, Wyoming, sure, but in Big Ten play, I mean, they were laying 3.5 against Iowa a few weeks ago. The biggest spread they've laid in Big Ten play. They won 9-6. It was gross. At Iowa in that game. It was vile. Now you're getting Illinois. I mean, just a few weeks ago, they were catching nearly a touchdown against Minnesota at home. Now they're going on the road to Nebraska, a team they're both off a bye. So I think, negate that. You're going to Nebraska over a touchdown. I think Nebraska will be the best offense that Illinois has seen this entire season. Illinois' offense is not explosive whatsoever. They're outside the top 100 in explosive pass and run rate, not outside the top 90 in yards per play. And I know this Nebraska defense isn't great. They just let up 40+ to Purdue. But I think the offense can match them with Casey Thompson. I think that they're going to stretch the field vertically, something that Illinois hasn't had to deal with all season. So getting over a touchdown with the Huskers at home, I like them off the bye. I mean, this team is showing more fight, off the firing of Scott Frost. I'm not saying, I actually think, I think they can win this game outright, honestly, just with the way their offense could go. Again, it's a changing situation. Like if Illinois was in a pick'em or something, I trust them to establish the run and keep this game tight and win late. Now you're expecting a team to win with margin, something they haven't been expected to do all season. No way. No shot. I like Nebraska here. Again, Nebraska winning this game would not surprise me at all. We're going to talk later, underdog round robin, Nebraska on the list. We'll save that one for later. Yeah, I think Nebraska is a live home dog for sure. Illinois was catching nearly a touchdown 2 weeks ago at home against Minnesota. Now they're going on the road and laying over a touchdown to Nebraska. I mean, Zach Shakin, I mean, your dad's an Illini alumni. Tell your dad his alumni is losing this weekend. So let's get that Big Ten recap graphic up, and we'll talk some Nebraska. All right, we'll recap there. We got Nebraska. I'm taking them plus 7.5 against Illinois, and then Ben is taking Michigan State plus 22.5 against Michigan. Little bro gonna cover against Big Bro this weekend.
Really quickly, Reed, just before we move on to the next one, is this a Mickey Joseph? If he wins this game, he sticks around for a little bit, or you think they do a full-on coaching search at the end of the season?
They still, I think, are going to try and go big game hunting. I think so. I think that Mickey Joseph isn't a big enough splash. That's like such a desperate fan base. I don't think Mickey Joseph is going to do enough for them. I guess the only way, and I know that there's like some chaotic Big Ten West scenarios. I guess if they go to the Big Ten championship, sure. I'm not sure how likely that is, if it's likely at all. I honestly haven't really been. I just know Illinois is at the top. There's so much chaos on the line, but I think that's the only thing that could win him this job. I don't think he's going to get the full-time job there.
They're 2-2 in conference, so they're sitting, I guess, one game behind Illinois. But Illinois, the one loss came against the Big Ten East team in Indiana. So again, you have Illinois, Purdue at 3-2, Nebraska at 2-2. So yeah, there's still a chance. It's
they're live. There's a lot of chaos
chance.
scenarios. Nebraska winning this week would make it like even crazier.
Yes.
I know Illinois has the leg up, so we'll see how that goes. But we're talking more underdogs right now. This is kind of like the theme of the show the past few weeks. But Ben, you're looking weeknight. I kind of gives it away with the segment on what side you're going to be on. But Washington State, Utah. This is like picking between my two sons here. Washington State, I was bullish on them before the season. Utah, I always have a soft spot in my heart for them. You like Wazoo though to cover it over a touchdown. Let me hear why.
I do. And just before we get started, Reed, I read your article over at BetSided. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you were on the under 55 and a half in this game, correct? Okay.
I don't have a bet yet, but that's where I would lean. I lean towards the Wazoo side, though.
Okay. So just like before, unders can often favor the underdogs, especially at home. I also remember you taking Washington State to upset USC, which again didn't happen, but I like the play. And USC, like Utah, very strong offensively. But I think this is a great opportunity, especially in these weird Thursday night games, for the Cougars to take hold as more than a touchdown underdog at home. And Utah's also been kind of fortunate with a few of their wins this year. You think about the overtime game in that comeback the other day. They also don't look good on defense right now. According to covers, Utah is allowing 7.4 yards per play against the 4 best offenses that they face this year. They also rank 114th in FBS and pass explosiveness. I like Washington State in this environment with the Thursday night matchup coming up this week. It just sets up very well because they're a team that keeps games close. They battle. And Utah, again, just it feels like they've had so many ups and then got back down. I don't like the inconsistency of this Utes team, even though they have the talent on offense. I think Washington State should be able to control this game. I don't know if they're necessarily like full on live, put all your money on it. But I do like them to cover the 8.5, and I'm certainly going to sprinkle a little bit on them at plus 240.
Yeah, this is a Washington State team that's been punching up above their weight class this entire season. This is a team I was bullish on before the year. I'm on their over win total. I am a little nervous, though, with injuries to their skill position players, Renard Bell and Nakia Watson, running back. Bell's a wide receiver. Watson is a running back. Got to see if they're both back. Watson's huge for them. A Wisconsin transfer, actually. He's been huge for them to help Cam Ward out in pass protection. I don't know. I think, this game could be probably tighter because of Utah's question marks on defense, but it's also Whittingham off a bye, extra prep time. Not sure. I don't know. I probably, because I like the under, it probably means I like Wazoo. Got to dig a little bit more into this one, but I don't hate the look. Mine, a little bit short of an underdog, but I do think that they are live to win as well. It's Louisville. I got it at +5. It's now +4. This is the last buy point for me. I make it inside of a field goal. Both teams have seen each quarterback a ton. These teams both know how to beat the other. Malik Cunningham for Louisville, Sam Hartman for Wake Forest. I mean, just the past 2 years, there's been a team that goes over 40. Last year, Cunningham, 300 passing yards, 4 total touchdowns. They lost on the road on a last-second field goal. The year before that, he only threw for 195, but had 3 total touchdowns, 24-point win. Hartman struggled that one. I think it was like 17 for 41 for like 250. So he struggled. So both teams know how to beat each other. And I really think Louisville's pass defense is going to be the key in this one to slow down that slow mesh Wake RPO offense. They're top 40 in success rate against the pass this season, top 10 in sacks. So, slow developing behind the line of scrimmage. I think the Louisville defensive line can get a push there. And then they also have the cornerbacks to stick with Donovan Green, A.T. Perry on the outside. So I like Louisville here and Malik Cunningham to really run wild and kind of shock this Wake Forest defense. I'm still not sure where I'm at with them. They let 36 points to Kadon Salter, a dual threat quarterback from Liberty, 51 to Clemson. They only allowed 21 to Florida State, who's a dynamic offense, but 2 missed field goals. Florida State had high success rate marks. So they were able to move the ball. They only scored 21 points. So, Wake has been profitable as an underdog. Like we said, Clemson, Florida State, those are dog matchups. I think they kind of come back to earth here. I think that Louisville is live for an upset here as well. Cunningham's been really up and down, but I think we see a big Cunningham performance, especially again, Wake beat them but last second field goal last year. I think Louisville has potential to hand them a loss. Definitely another game that's probably going to come down to the last possession. So Louisville +4 is my underdog pick for this week. So let's get that recap graphic up. We'll get some late night action. We'll talk some totals. Ben, he's taking Thursday night football, Washington State 8.5 versus Utah. Good thing Ben is off on Fridays because he's going to be up late sweating that one out. And then I am taking Louisville +4 against Wake Forest, another home dog there. There's our underdog best bets. Now let's talk some totals, some late night totals. Under the lights. I believe these games both start after 10. But Ben, you're going Mountain West. I'm going Pac-12. So talk to me about Colorado State, Boise State. This is, people have been lining up to hear about this one.
Yeah, you mentioned that I'm going to be up late Thursday night. I don't even know if I'm going to watch this game. I might just put the bet in and try to get myself a good night's sleep and maybe pay attention to the Thursday night game between the Ravens and the Bucks instead and hope for something a little bit more compelling. I mean, Colorado State is it's bad. Boise State being a 27-point favorite in this game, low total in almost every trend leading up to this game. Everything favors the under here. Colorado State's gone 7-0 this year in unders. Boise State 4-3 after a loss, which has been pretty much every game this season. It's been the under for Colorado State. Everything just sets up for a Rams team that just can't score. And we're seeing a Boise State team that was limited to 14, or that gave up only 14 points last week. Been one of the better defenses in college football this year. I think 43, even though it's a low total for college football standards, and the Broncos still have some solid opportunities on offense, I just don't think they need to get there. They can take their foot off the gas pedal because the Rams aren't doing anything to get and generate points on the board. I think this moves to 8-0 in unders for the Rams this year. So 43, yeah, it's one right around that key number, but I don't mind it. I don't mind going under here just because I don't think Boise State, even though they have the talent, had to almost get this by themselves against Colorado State. I don't think they need to. I think they take their foot off the gas, and this ends up being like a 34-3 type game.
Yeah, Boise was kind to me last week, upsetting Air Force outright. We had that on the early read. I agree with you though.
Yeah, I nailed that pick, by the way.
I'm glad we won. Boise State, definitely a stock up team on offense, but again, like you said, they're probably gonna have to score this like on their own. Like, this looks more like something like 34-3, like you just said, like, lower scoring than this. I think Boise probably going to cover the 4 touchdown spread, but I don't know if they're putting up 45 points. So I agree with you there. Colorado State, Boise State under 43. No play for me just because that's a little too gross, but I can't fault the play. I'm going like the complete opposite way though. We spoke about Oregon earlier. I'm not going to talk about the other side of that game, UCLA Stanford. I'm going to take over 64.5. Again, another key number is 65. So 65 is a stop point for me. I play 65. That's it. I think that this game could push 70. We saw the UCLA defense struggle last week. I mean, guys running wild just downfield, rushing the ball, no push, swing passes, just everything was open for Oregon. More than 7 yards per play, 45 points. The Stanford team that likes to play fast too, top 40 in plays per minute. They run this RPO offense with Tanner McKee. I think that they're going to be able to move the ball against Stanford's going to be able to move the ball against UCLA. I am Pac-12 play UCLA, 32 points. To UCLA, 32 points to Utah, 32 points to Washington, 45 to Oregon, 17 to Colorado, but we know how bad Colorado is on offense, so throw that out. I think Stanford is closer to the other three than they are to Colorado. And on the other side, I mean, Stanford's defense is just absolutely terrible. I don't know how they up only 14 points to Arizona State and under 20 to Notre Dame. Stanford, 98th in tackles for loss, 100th in red zone touchdown percentage. So again, team getting in close. They are putting it in for 6, not for 3. Bottom 10 nationally yards per carry. So Zach Charbonnet, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I think they're running wild. This looks to me like a 45-28 type game. I think UCLA probably covers. They take their frustrations out a little bit, but Stanford, I think, is going to move the ball a little bit against a kind of underwhelming UCLA defensive front. So I'm going to take the over 64.5 there. And yeah, those are all our segments. We got a few more bets we want to get to, but let's get that recap graphic up. Few totals for the late night action. Ben's taking the under 43 in Colorado State. Boise State, I am going like the complete other way and taking over 64.5 in UCLA Stanford. There's our late night action.
How bad is football in the state of Colorado right now? I know that Air Force
worst state in the entire country. Worst state.
It's brutal between the Broncos and the Buffaloes and then the Rams. Thank goodness for Air Force for at least making it somewhat interesting. But there's a whole lot of bad football.
Air Force is underwhelmed this year. Air Force is kind of drawing dead in the Mountain West now. They were the projected favorites. I know a lot of people were on that. So, let's talk some best of the rest. So I have I have like 4 quick hitters I want to get through. But Ben, I know you have some underdog round robin questions, so maybe let's rattle off a few of those. We'll do like 2 minutes on that, and then I'll hit my 4 remaining bets, and then we'll get to some questions. How about that? So I know you have a list there, so just hit open fire. Hit me.
Okay. All right. Putting together the last couple of weeks, been fortunate to have 4 of these 5 hit. Last week, took Minnesota against Penn State. Obviously, that didn't work out with their quarterback injury. But yeah, I've it's been effective in targeting a handful of mid-afternoon games and then a few hammers on some of the later games. Not the late night games, but sort of that evening 6:30, 7 o'clock Eastern tip-off. So I'm following the same formula for this week. It also just happens that the matchups work out in that favor as well. I like to go money line underdog round robins here. Again, I typically like to go 3 out of the 5, sometimes 4 out of the 5. I feel like the matchups are set. So here's where I'm leaning this week, Reed, and tell me if you think I'm off base on any of these. We've also talked about maybe 1 or 2 of them as well. I like Tulsa, the short home dog against SMU this week. UCF at home against Cincinnati. I just realized that all 5 of these games are short underdogs at home. Didn't even realize that when I was putting this together. It's gross, especially on the offensive side, but UMass against New Mexico State, like them to be able to get it done on the money line. You mentioned Louisville as a team that you like as one of your favorite underdogs. They're at home against Wake Forest. And then this one is probably the grossest one of them all because everything about them makes you want to go the opposite way right now. I certainly prefer the coach on the other side of the field, just as a guy that I feel like I can much more want to root for than Jimbo Fisher. But I will take Texas A&M laying points at home against an Ole Miss team that finally got humbled a little bit after an undefeated start to the year. So Tulsa, UCF, UMass, Louisville, Texas A&M. There's your money line underdog round robin for college football week 9. Where are the weaknesses in this round for this week?
Probably UMass because they're terrible. And then Tulsa, I want to know more about the quarterback situation. I weirdly think if it's going to be the backup Preston Stone who finished the SMU game against Cincy and nearly led a comeback. Tanner Mordecai was in concussion protocol. I actually think that if they go to Stone, I like SMU a little bit more, probably at a reduced price. So I guess I think Tulsa's pretty terrible, to be honest with you. But in terms of UCF, I love UCF. I'm going to have a bet in on UCF for sure. That's a team, that's a spot I had circled. There's a team I had to win the AAC. Lost last week, made it a little bit trickier, but I think they beat Cincinnati and they get back on track. So give me the Knights and John Reese Plumlee to run wild against a fraudulent Cincinnati team in my eyes. Louisville is one I mentioned. A&M, I have another bet on them, so I'll get into that. I can't back this team. A lot of question marks. 3 offensive linemen were ruled out for the rest of the year. A few freshmen were suspended. I don't know if I can get there. Ole Miss still has a few things to play for. They're banged up also. So I guess it's like A&M money line, but I don't know. I have a bet on that. I'll get to, I guess right now, that's kind of the last one I've written down. But overall, Ben, I'm a huge advocate. For anyone watching the show and knows the bets, I bet a lot of underdogs. I think there's a lot of variance in college football where you could cash in on live underdogs, especially, you see teams favored by 10 points that probably shouldn't be. I know yours are a little bit shorter this week. You've sent me the other slips, and I know that you're backing plus 200 underdogs. Of course, you could get crushed. It's variance, but if you play the variables, you could end up coming up way ahead here. So backing underdogs, especially money lines, they happen every week. You gotta just know which ones are live, and looking at home underdogs, it's a good place to look. So, I think you have you're on the start of something. The foundation's being built on your round robin. It is only Tuesday, so I think that there's something cooking there.
Yeah, this is very much a first draft. As many of you remember from your days in high school, college, you write a paper, you got to go through it a handful of times is what we do here over at BetSided. We might have something, but you got to give it another pair of views and make some changes. And then hopefully you send it out into the world and you feel pretty good about it.
For sure. Okay, so I got 4 more bets I want to give out really quick. Big game in the Big 12, Kansas State, Oklahoma State. Kansas State was kind of destroying TCU early in that game. I thought, all right, my Horned Frogs, they're in some trouble here. Adrian Martinez got hurt in the first drive. Didn't matter. Howard came in the backup, experienced backup, looked great. He got hurt. The third stringer, that was kind of the end of it. He was a mess. Howard ended up coming back in. We haven't heard much about Martinez. I think Howard's good to go. I think he hurt a shoulder, but then came back in. So I imagine he'll be good to play. I obviously like Martinez, but Kansas State -1.5 is a bet for me. I will be adding with further confirmation, maybe add a big favorite in there with them. But Kansas State, this Oklahoma State defense, last week, all anyone wanted to talk about was how Spencer Sanders' shoulder was hurt and they were catching nearly a touchdown against Texas at home. Now they're going to go on the road and be nearly a coin flip against Kansas State. I don't understand. This Kansas State offense, top 10 in yards per carry. They have one of the most electric running backs in the country, Deuce Vaughn. 5 yards a carry, 100 yards a game. He's amazing, honestly. And this is Oklahoma State defense, middling in EPA per rush and yards per carry allowed. So I think Kansas State at home, Chris Kleiman is a stud. 26-14-1 against the spread since getting to Manhattan. 10-4 as a favorite since getting to the Little Apple. So I like Kansas State as small home favorites. Next up, North Texas plus 10 against Western Kentucky, going from like a huge game in the Big 12 to that. UAB should have been in Western Kentucky. Dylan Hopkins, their quarterback, got hurt on like the first drive of the game. UAB fumbled it 3 times in their own territory, had just a gut-wrenching goal to go, interception in the end zone. And Western Kentucky held on to win by, I think it was like 3. I think North Texas, they could challenge the Western Kentucky air raid. They have a decent secondary. They are top 20 in they have top 20 in yards per carry on offense, top 20 in sacks allowed on offense. So Western Kentucky, I think that they're going to allow some points, and North Texas could keep it within one possession here. So North Texas plus 10. Ben, you were just talking about A&M Ole Miss. I played the under 55. Again, key number of 55. Anything below, wouldn't like it as much. Maybe drop it down to like a half unit play. But A&M's offense is just terrible. 18 points per game this year. They haven't scored more than 30 now in over a year. Jimbo Fisher has no idea what he's doing calling this offense. 3 offensive linemen ruled out for the rest of the year. It looks like Haynes King is going to go, which makes me like it even better because I know he's terrible. We don't really know about the 5-star freshman as much. Ole Miss offense, outside the scripted plays last week at LSU, not so great. They're up 14-3, ended up losing 45-20. So, yeah, that's not great. Banged up running backs. They're a run-first team. Ulysses Bentley, the SMU transfer, he's been in and out of the lineup. Zach Evans, he's probably going to be limited again. So, under 55 is my play there. And last one, TCU. The team total isn't available yet. It is projected to be around 38. 30 team total over 38 is a play for me. We bet this before. We will bet it again. Hit it in every game. West Va's allowed 38 or more in every single Big 12 game, including 50 or more against Kansas. Their defense outside the top 100 in pass success rate. Maybe West Va can hang with TCU this week. It's a potential letdown spot. But that being said, the Horned Frogs offense is going to get their quota. West Va is going to have to outscore them like they did against Baylor 2 weeks ago to get the win. So, TCU team total over 38. When that comes out, that's going to be my play. There's a bunch of bets. We'll get the recap graphic up in a sec. But let's get some questions here from the comments, and then we'll get out of here. We will start with we're checking in the Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State draw from the hat scenario. Ben, you're a Big Ten guy too. I saw this floated around. I think it's if Penn State beats Ohio State this week, and that which neither of us think is really going to happen, but let's go with it. And then Michigan beats Ohio. No, and then Ohio State beats Michigan in the game Thanksgiving weekend. Apparently, there's a draw from a hat scenario where the Big Ten champion goes based on how the hat is drawn from the Big Ten East. I am not sure how real this is. I guess I'd love to see it. I have an Ohio State future, so I guess I don't really want to see it. But, I mean, Ben, you know anything about this?
I haven't heard much about it. I'm surprised. I suppose it's theoretically a fair way to do it, but why not? There's so many other factors that can be used as a means to justify who the proper Big Ten East champion should be, besides drawing a name out of hat. I mean, we can talk about strength of schedule. We can talk about the ability to have the better margin of victory. We have.
I don't know how true this is.
It can't be.
I have asked
fun, but
I have asked a Michigan alumni that I know for a fact knows the answer to this question. And hopefully he will give me a live response as I'm texting him right now. So we will get to our next question, then hopefully we'll get back to
I haven't heard anything regarding this actually being a scenario this week.
So anyway, we'll get back. I'm waiting to get an answer here.
I feel like the dots are probably just flashing on your phone right now.
Yeah, I'm trying. He is answering the text. So, okay. So anyway, another one we want to talk about. We didn't get to this one. It is a big game in the SEC. Tennessee playing Kentucky. Josh Grossman just wrote Kentucky. I imagine that means he's taking Kentucky. I don't hate the look at Kentucky. To me, it's Kentucky or pass. Sorry, trying to get an answer to this tiebreaker thing, but I think it's dog or pass for me. Kentucky, this is a team off a bye. They are getting healthier. Will Levis has been injured in and out of the lineup. Their star quarterback. I think Kentucky, I wish it was 14. I think it's now drifted inside. I think it's closer to 13. Stepping in front of Tennessee is tough, but I do think Kentucky is a team on the upswing. I mean, they suspended Chris Rodriguez for the first 4 games, off a bye, Levis healthy. I think that they could keep this close, especially with Tennessee. Is this team going to slow down? Just maybe like looking ahead, you got Georgia on the horizon here at home. Kentucky's ranked and they're going to get their full attention, but is there a chance that maybe, Kentucky, who Mark Stoops, again, I wish I had, I could look this up, but Mark Stoops against the spread as an underdog is money. So I don't hate to look at Kentucky. It'd be dog or pass for me. Ben, any thoughts here?
Maybe lean towards the over. It's gone 11-1 in Tennessee's last 12 home games. Every statistical trend is basically leading towards the over in this matchup. They're 4-0 in their last 4 games following an against the spread win. And then also, if you're looking for it on the Kentucky side as well, they're 6-1 in overs in their last 7 games when they allow less than 275 total yards in the previous game. So a lot of times it's flipping onto what was typically been a solid under team in Kentucky with a good defense, but they're leaning over here, and I certainly understand why.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Like I said, Levis finally getting healthy off a bye week, maybe kind of round into form a little bit. So I don't hate the look there either. Okay, so from my Big Ten source, shout out to a good friend Bob here. He says if Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan all have one loss to each other, so that would be Penn State beats Ohio State beats Michigan, and then, of course, Michigan already beat Penn State. The winner is the team who played the harder crossover. So the combined conference record of the 3 West teams they played. So that's too much for us to do right now on the show. But the hat scenario would come in only if that also was a tie.
Okay.
So
all right.
it
So
is a tiebreaker of another tiebreaker.
They might as well just call this the rock, paper, scissors format.
Exactly.
Right?
It's like in Friday Night Lights where they all have to meet at the gas station and do rock, paper, scissors for it. Or no, they did the coin flip. Coin flip.
Yeah. But I mean, this is what it is. Like Michigan beats Ohio State. Ohio State is rock, paper, scissors. Yeah.
So to answer Henry's question, no, probably not coming into play, but I guess, people can root for things. I don't know what the strength of the schedule thing is. I guess with everybody being so clumped up in the West, I guess it could be potentially everybody all tied up, but we'll see. Maybe next week I'll come in with some questions, I guess, depending on if Penn State beats Ohio State. But let's bring up that full recap graphic, and we'll wrap this up here in case you missed the start. But Ben, he is on the Ohio State, Penn State under 61, Temple plus 13.5 against Navy, Michigan State plus 22.5 against Michigan, Washington State plus 8.5 against Utah, and Colorado State, Boise State under 43. And then for me, I am on also the Ohio State, Penn State under 61, Cal plus 17.5 against Oregon, Nebraska plus 7.5 against Illinois, Louisville plus 4 against Wake Forest, UCLA, Stanford over 64.5. And I threw a few more in there. Make sure you just rewind a few minutes to the best of the rest. And that will be all our picks for this week. Ben, thank you very much for coming on. I will have a bunch more bets in the rest of the week. You can check that out over my bet stamp at RW33. While you're here, make sure you make sure you subscribe. We want to get to 1,000 subscribers here over at BetSided so we can keep doing this great work for you. Big shout out to Joanne Woodcock behind the scenes, the best in the business. And until then, have a great week 9. Then it's double digits. We are off to week 10 college football. Best of luck, everybody.